just like everyone else on the planet, I saw Wicked for Good last year. And last year, I also got into some Brandon Sanderson discourse on TikTok. So I have thoughts. Thoughts about discourse, thoughts about Wicked discourse, and thoughts about Brandon Sanderson, and thoughts about us. These thoughts are not super organized, just know that I have them and I'm going to share them, and good luck keeping up, I guess.
It's 100 floors of Franks. They're not all gonna be winners.
I was a theater kid from a very young age. I actually saw Wicked as a stage show when I was about 10, so I'm not a stranger to Wicked and how, misshapen the second half of Wicked is. So I went into For Good with realistic expectations. Tragically, though, I still think the film has warped the story even more by extending parts that I think they should have shrunk and shrinking the parts that I think they should have extended. This is not going to be a For Good review. This is more going to be an analysis of For Good through the lens of a socio-political perspective. Because I feel like the changes made in For Good add this weird, stilted feeling that muddled the overall message of Wicked. Now, to be fair, I think that's also a little true for the stage show. The stage show doesn't stick the landing perfectly. The movie isn't special in its poor ending, but the first half of Wicked posits a nuanced and intriguing philosophical question about political change, and for some reason, the second half decides that the question itself is stupid. The second half decides really to not answer the question at all, and the movie does so even less. So instead of deconstructing the film For Good, I want to deconstruct that question that Wicked asks us. The question it attempts to ask us, but fails to answer for. If you're watching this, I assume you know enough about Wicked and Wicked for Good that I don't have to give a synopsis or give a spoiler warning. That being said, I want to clarify that the Wicked movie is going to be the topic of our discussion, not the stage show. The only universe of Wicked that I will be addressing will be Wicked and Wicked for Good, directed by John M. Chu. That's the one that is brightest in the current cultural zeitgeist. That is the one for this discussion, and that's the one I will also be relating to Brandon Sanderson. We're gonna get there, just give me a second. But before we get to any of that, I need to introduce you to Audre Lorde. You might not know her name, but I'm willing to bet you know some of her work based on the fact that a lot of modern leftist activism, especially Black activism, is built off of a lot of her work. Audre Lorde was a political activist and a writer who described herself as a Black lesbian, mother, warrior, and poet. In 1979, she published an essay titled "The Master's Tools Will Never Dismantle the Master's House." And this title pretty much summarizes her entire philosophy in the paper. But I'll break it down for you real quick, in case you're not familiar. The overall idea is that you cannot change an oppressive system by using the oppressive system itself as a tool for change, as the system itself has no lanes for which you can overhaul it. It is designed specifically not to have those lanes. This is a feature, not a bug. Lorde was speaking on this issue from a very specific perspective as a Black lesbian in the 70s. And this essay mostly focuses on how those specific experiences are when engaging with the patriarchy and the cis heteronormative systems in the United States, and how they intersect with an anti-Black American system that is specifically built by and for racism. Even though Lorde was speaking about her own experiences, her philosophy rings true for pretty much every oppressive class in the United States and in the world. The idea of the master's tools is one that resonates with many other sociological theories and aspects. If you need it explained to you a little bit more, let me give you a modern example of the master's tools not dismantling the master's house. Let's look at the US electoral system. Our system basically makes it impossible to run a candidate that isn't Republican or Republican light. Because of this, we as activists cannot effectively use the electoral system to uproot the powers that control the electoral system. We are stuck in a two-party dichotomy. We cannot realistically run a third-party candidate, and we cannot realistically infiltrate the Republican or Democratic parties with a progressive candidate. And listen, I vote every opportunity I get. I do not want to hear from a bunch of vote-happy liberals in the comments. I vote all the time. I voted in this last election, don't come for me. It's my personal principle to vote in every election available to me since my family immigrated from countries without elections. But I also acknowledge that the Electoral College is a master's tool used to prop up the master's house, and it's not going to turn on its master anytime soon. It's designed explicitly not to. While that is a really tangible, real world, black and white example, Lorde was also thinking more conceptually. How can you really analyze a racist patriarchy while living in the racist patriarchy? Existing in the rules of that racist patriarchy kneecaps your ability to overturn the racist patriarchy. How do you move forward to make change while having to abide by the laws in the racist patriarchal country? The rules are inherently racist and inherently patriarchal. So, how do you change that system while trapped within that system? I'm sure you get where I'm going by now, since this question is fully represented in Alphaba's entire character. The Master's tools and the Master's house is inadvertently the thesis of Wicked. Alphaba sees that the system under the wizard is broken, and in turn rejects the wizard and his system entirely, with a goal of fixing it from the outside. She can't bear to be a part of it, for to be a part of it would be to commit atrocities against her moral code in exchange for the slim hope of long term, slow, creeping progress. She's aware, after using the Grimoire on the monkeys, that the system can't be salvaged in its current state. It's far too gone. The subjugation that the animals face is far too great, far too integrated, and far too far along. So she exits the system. She has to. As we know, though, Glinda doesn't. Glinda stays within the system. This is framed as being something out of fear, which is honestly perfectly understandable. Especially for someone like Glinda, who does benefit from the system, the idea of exiting privilege and entering active oppression can be really daunting. We as an audience do understand why Glinda stays, even if we don't agree with it. The narrative hopes that you see what Alphaba's trying to do and agree with her more, even while understanding why Glinda might make choices she would make. It's very nuanced in that way. The problem is, I think John M. Chu gave Glinda too much nuance in For Good to justify the canonical ending of Wicked. Because the canonical ending of Wicked is that Alphaba fails. The Master's tools don't bring down the Master's house in the original Wicked story, but neither do any tools. At least not any tools that the marginalized Alphaba can wield. The only tool that fixes anything in For Good is Glinda. The wizard leaving, of course, is a part of that, but Glinda making him leave. Glinda putting away Madame Morrible. Glinda using her power within the system to change the system for some reason. Alphaba fails, especially in her eyes, and us as the audience, though, when watching Wicked for Good, don't get the idea that she fails because Glinda kind of succeeds for her. I guess this poses the question of legacy or personal effect on others, as I've seen people online push back against the narrative that Alphaba fails, saying that Alphaba was the whole reason Glinda did anything she does at the end in the first place, meaning that Alphaba's struggles were not for naught because Glinda finishes her work. And to an extent, that's kind of true, but I saw Wicked for Good twice to double check my notes, and that's not really how the film has this conversation with the audience. The movie wants to trick you into thinking that's what's happening, but that's not what's happening on screen or in text. Because the biggest way the movie tricks you with this is the concept of accountability. Babbity Kate on TikTok has made some great videos elaborating on this concept, so I won't go too far in depth. I'll just recommend you go watch some of her For Good videos, but I will say that Glinda faces no accountability for her actions, and none of the people that she's working with now will be aware of the true level of destruction and turmoil that she enabled. The reality of accountability is that you cannot hold someone accountable if you do not personally know them and you do not personally know what they've actually done. This is the reason that online cancel mobs can get so confusing, is because thousands of people online can't really hold you accountable. They don't know you. And you can't hold a stranger accountable and demand them to do better because you're not actually able to see if they do better, nor are you able to actually understand what happened in the first place, what they should be held accountable for. There's a level of distance that makes accountability impossible. And the same thing is happening here in Wicked. No one is fully aware of Glinda's deep involvement with the wizard, her knowledge of the animal genocide, the way she engages with and betrays Alphaba, the whole 9 yards. Glinda being in Wonderful was a choice. From a gay perspective, yes, absolutely, I love Toxic Yuri, but from the perspective of someone who wanted to see proper political commentary in the movies, yikes. Yikes 1000 times. Because Glinda really here doubles down on all things involving the wizard's policies and the animal genocide, and still doesn't understand exactly what she's doing wrong. And I don't think at the end of the movie she understands either. She changes for Alphaba, just for Alphaba, not because she has seen the light when it comes to animals, not because she's truly seen the light when it comes to the wizard. The movie kind of skims over all of that. It's very surface level. It's very Ariana forward. It's very confusing because the movie, whose thesis statement is you can't take down the master's house with the master's tools, ends the movie with the master's tools taking down the master's house because a master has changed her mind because she was gay. The master's house is dismantled with master's tools wielded by a master. What do we do with that? Because the reality is, this isn't how it works. Not in the real world, not with what we're dealing with today in America. So, what does all this have to do with Brandon Sanderson? So, I got into some Brandon Sanderson discourse on Book Talk because I said that I don't read Brandon Sanderson's books because I don't want to financially support him because Brandon Sanderson is Mormon. And this is not me being inherently anti Mormon, even though I have my own opinions about religions like Mormonism. This is because of the active financial harm that the Latter day Saints do. So, if you were unaware, the Mormon Church has a standing law that quote unquote encourages, but rather forces, the members of the Mormon Church to donate 10% of their annual income in a tithe to the church. The church then uses that money to then push legislation both on a state and federal level that is inherently discriminatory and inherently bigoted. Not only do they actively lobby for anti abortion legislation and candidates, but they also lobby for anti LGBT bills. They fund anti immigration laws, they fund racial discrimination and voter suppression laws. The Mormon Church has its hands on essentially everything that this current administration is attempting to do, whether you like that or not. And this is not like a hot take opinion. This is just a financial fact. The reality is that the money goes there. The Mormon tithe goes there. This is what the Mormon Church does. You can either go with that and understand that's where the money goes or live in denial. But the reality is that money is a stagnant, non-opinionated thing, and that's what it's funding, and that's just a fact. And Brandon Sanderson is not a small fish in the Mormon world. He is a very rich man who gives a large tithe to the church. While I cannot speak for Brandon Sanderson's personal politics, as he's not very open about them, I can say that I don't like where his money goes and that I don't want my money going to him to go to there. When I said this on TikTok, a pretty large group of people tried to convince me that Brandon Sanderson is one of the good Mormons, that he's actively trying to change the church from the inside, that he's hoping to be a good influence to the Mormon church to help them become more progressive. I don't doubt that Brandon Sanderson's message of love and acceptance, his support of disability, especially in regards to his children and in his writing, and his most recent acceptance of queer people, I don't doubt that's not doing something. But the reality is that Brandon Sanderson is not a bishop or an elder in the Mormon church. He's not making any laws or rules. Brandon Sanderson is actually just giving them money of which they are enacting their policies under. They're not changing their policies to accept his money. He's not withholding his money until they change their policies. He's not out here changing the active Mormon financial stance on conversion therapy, abortion rights, etc. When money is involved, your feelings don't really matter. It becomes very black and white. Brandon Sanderson says he wants to make change, and maybe he is helping a little bit with social stigmas, but he also lectures at BYU, knowing that BYU has a code of conduct that is extremely strict and discriminatory against queer people. Not only this, but the Mormon Church is extremely racist inherently, structurally, systemically. The Mormon Bible explicitly states that Black people are against God, that they are demons, that they are made by the devil. Black men and women weren't allowed to join the Mormon Church until 1978, and they were not allowed to become preachers, pastors, bishops, whatever you want to call it, until 2013. The student population of BYU is less than 1% Black. The reality is that the Mormon religion is structurally a menace in the United States that causes large sweeping damage to minority groups, not just socially, not just through verbal hate, but through rules, laws, and money. Brandon Sanderson pulling a Glinda, smiling and waving and claiming that he's going to make social change just by being good and setting a good example isn't doing anything. The master's tools, his 10% tithe of large sums of money, is not going to change the Mormon church. And like I said, he's not withholding his yearly donation until they make change. He is giving them his current money to enact their current policies while verbally claiming that he's trying to make change. He's pulling a Glinda. He's being extremely passive, and he's just hoping that a good attitude changes literal genocide. Here in the real world, the master's tools don't take down the master's house. I don't understand why that was the attempted message of Wicked for Good. I feel a little lost. I think people are really scared of painful truths, and one of those truths is failure, especially when that failure can result in so much pain. Social progress is not linear, it is very much back and forth. I understand RuPaul is no saint, but he does actually have a quote that I really appreciate when it comes to social progress and change, which is the idea of little windows. There will be moments in time where social progress goes far, goes wide, and is beautiful, and you have these windows to truly and safely be yourself. And then the windows will close. They will open again eventually, but they will close. The conservative backlash will happen, whether you want it to or not. You will take steps backwards, whether you want to or not. The important thing is to keep your head above water and to keep moving, to keep fighting to open that window, and while that window is open, take advantage of it as much as you physically can. But the painful reality of that is that the window will close. Eventually, there will be a political failure. In my opinion, we are in one now. I don't want to say that the message of the Wicked movies ends up being failure, but it might be in a roundabout way. It kind of is. I mean, I don't think that's good or bad. I think it just is. And I think that I would have preferred it not to be. I would have preferred some social awareness around the character of Glinda, especially since the movies specifically take things in a more serious, somber tone than the stage play does. Since the movies push themselves so hard with the political messaging, since Cynthia Erivo herself is a Black queer woman. This movie, and specifically how it expanded Glinda's role, gave some very weird meta commentary about a heterosexual white woman and a Black lesbian, and it's just a little odd. I think it's an unintentional message. I don't know if John M. Chu had his head above water with this one, but I think he should have. I also think maybe this wouldn't have been such a glaringly obvious, odd tonal change if we weren't in the current times that we live in. Like I said, this video is a little bit more on the unstructured side. It's a little bit more back and forth. I did write a script, but I wrote it more loosely, and I might have taken a little Eddie before recording, who's to say. At the end of the day, all I can say is that Brandon Sanderson's still not going to be getting my money. I really didn't enjoy Wicked for Good, especially those last 10 minutes. And I really hope more people start to wake up to the idea that this fantasy of the good person within the system changing the system is unrealistic, because the system itself is what needs to be dismantled in order for the change to occur. Words, 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 conclusion, conclusion, conclusion. I don't know. Tell me your thoughts in the comments. Maybe I'm making this as more of a discussion. Maybe this is a prompt for your own response. Tell me how you feel.